Yes, people, welcome back. Legal Harry J. Legal reggae music, Frankie Paul style. Doing a reggae spotlight again today. It's been a while since I did one of these. I still have some label spotlights I need to do, but I had to pay tribute to one of the big names of reggae that passed away recently, May 18th of this year. Frankie, Dancehall Paul they call him, passed away May 18th. He had been suffering from diabetes related illnesses, had actually one of his legs partially amputated last year, kept on performing until succumbing very recently. Frankie Paul was a massive star all through the 1980s. Started out very early 80s. He's been dubbed the Jamaican Stevie Wonder. It's kind of the catchy buzz phrase that's been attached to his name pretty well since he started out. He was born blind. His real name is Paul Blake. He went to a special school where, as the legend goes, Stevie Wonder appeared one day to speak to the kids. Frankie got to perform in front of Stevie Wonder, and Stevie was so impressed that he encouraged Frankie to pursue music as his vocation, which he did. Frankie Paul started making records in the early 80s as what was called dancehall style of reggae was beginning to emerge. Throughout the 1970s, roots reggae had prevailed, typified by or spearheaded by Bob Marley and the Wailers, of course. Bob Marley passed away in the early 80s, and around that time, shortly before even, you'd started to see a new crop of younger performers bringing kind of a different kind of energy into the music coming out of Jamaica. More vibrant, I would say, more exuberant, more into celebrating the joys of being young, being alive, being in the dance hall, enjoying yourself, as opposed to some of the strictly righteous themes that had prevailed in the few years before that. And Frankie Paul typified that approach as well as anything with his exuberant kind of vocals. He has a slight nasal tinge to his voice, but cranked out an incredibly prolific series of records throughout his career. Discography in the triple digits. So I'm going to show you what I've got. It's not really very much, not even a scratch on the surface of his massive discography. Some of his very earliest releases were Clash albums released through the Channel 1 studio, which was the top-ranking studio at the time. Starting with Showdown Volume 2. These were Clash albums where an established artist would have one side and a younger up-and-coming artist would have the other side, and the listener would decide who came out on top. So this was him pitted against Sugar Minott, top singer of the time, and this went on to one of the other iconic albums covers of the time from 1986. I don't have this LP. Frankie Paul, Shut Up Why. You see that artwork by the famous Lemonious, often cited as one of the greatest reggae covers and the greatest cover artist in reggae. This is from a book called Stir It Up, reggae covered art, by the way. Probably the earliest album I have by Frankie Paul is one called Give Me That Feeling. I think around 1984 on this one. That's on the Moody's label out of the US. Following on from this is when Frankie Paul was really starting to catch fire and crank out the hits. Put a further album out on the Joe Gibbs label called Be My Lady. Kind of a cheesy sort of 80s cover, but actually a really good album. On the classic Joe Gibbs US label, based out of Florida, formerly owned by Sue Fernandez. Shout out to you, Sue, if you're still around. Beautiful condition album on this one. And we've got strictly reggae music. same year, 84. This one is on E.J. Robinson's Top Rank label. Sly and Robbie locking down the bass and drums on this one. Also excellent, excellent album. 6 tracks, extended style. He continued with the kind of Clash-themed albums. Here's another one, 1985 on this one, pitting him against dancehall singer Michael Palmer. 1985 on this one, on the iconic Greensleeves label out of the UK. Now, Frankie Paul's career really kicked into high gear when he linked up with some of the top name producers of the early 80s period. One of them was Henry Junjo Law, as they call him, who is cranking out hits at a furious rate. And for Junjo, Frankie Paul put out a tune called Pass the Tushang Pang, a Herb song. And this also appeared on 12-inch, also on the Greensleeves label. One of his most iconic songs. One of the other main producers that Frankie Paul worked for at the time was a producer called George Fang. And for that one, Frankie Paul had an equally huge hit called Tidal Wave. This is the LP. Frankie Dancehall Paul in full effect, produced by George Fang. And the dancehall subject matter, as I said, it loosened up a bit. The singers and the DJs or rappers were free to comment on more any subject they felt like. You know, girls, just being out, having a good time, whatever. Even singing about the dance hall itself. And the exuberant feeling of those times. That also appeared on the Greensleeves label. 1985. In 1985, the sound began to change to a more computerized sound, what became known as digital reggae. A producer called King Jammy unleashed a rhythm track called Under Me Sling Ting, which was built around a Casio keyboard riff. Now this caused a sensation, and for the next several years reggae would be dominated by these kind of digital rhythms, played more with a combination of live instruments and technology rather than strictly live instruments. Some artists struggled to keep up with this new sound. Frankie Paul carried on right as before, hit big with a song called Casanova, produced by King Jammy, who absolutely dominated from 1985 until the late 80s, early 90s. Classic Jammy's label there. I'm going to show, that's what I've got for the LPs. I'm going to show you a few 12 inches. Another Jammy's production. Classic blue and white Jammy's label. This is a combination with another dancehall singer, Richie Stephens. The two of them doing a duet called Jammin'. Great tune here. Also appearing on the Live and Love label. Casanova again. Huge tune. You also hit big with Sarah, a cover of the Starship song from the mid-80s, I guess. I think that was also for Jammy's. One big one I had, picked this up I think last year, I believe. This is a UK pressing on Blacker Dread out of England. The Beginning of the Ending, Frankie Paul. UK 12-inch there, one of his big tunes. And this is another one I picked up fairly recently. I've filmed a video showing this one, haven't gotten around to uploading it yet. It is another one of his massive tunes for Henry Junjo Laws from the mid-80s. Worries in the Dance. Got sound markings on there from being played on a reggae sound system. Worries in the Dance refers to anyone who will test Frankie Paul's songs in the dance hall, because they're going to get flopped. As the 80s dawned into the 90s, Frankie Paul kept on producing for a variety of producers, particularly working with Philip Fatis Burrell's Exterminator label. Exterminator was a label that updated the sound of from some of the sparseness and the harshness of the digital era, while lyrically and subject matter harking back to more of the roots reggae era and kind of trying to bridge the two worlds. The digital era having turned off a lot of traditional reggae fans. I have this one, Frankie Paul on the Exterminator label, Only Begun. This is 1988, quite an early Exterminator production. And one of the top songs of his from the era was one called Songs of Freedom. Took me a long time to find this one. I'd had it on a CDR or something for years. And what we were listening to in the intro, I thought I'd do a needle drop since this one is a little more under the radar than some of his bigger hits. Hopefully it'll escape the copyright censors. Legal Reggae Music on the Harry J label. I think 1985 on this one again, more of a digital sound. So I'm going to leave you with a taste of that. Frankie Paul, rest in peace, one of the absolute greats of Jamaican music. Legal reggae music all the way. Hope you enjoyed, guys. This is another reggae spotlight. It's kind of interesting doing these. My regular videos, I'll get comments kind of the first couple of days and then it'll taper off. These reggae videos, sometimes I'll get comments for months afterwards. Cheers, guys. Hope you enjoyed, and peace.